So, thanks for joining us again. We are with Dr. Jackie Smith, the epidemiologist at the University of Kentucky, and we are continuing our conversation about the maps she has made, which you can find at the University of Kentucky's Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. A few things I wanted to point out before we get started. First, if you're a veterinarian out there, consider using the University of Kentucky Diagnostic Lab. They have wonderful staff there that are very helpful and world-class. And anyone in the country can send samples to the diagnostic lab. So take advantage of their services. Second, a lot of the topics we are going to kind of cover in this second episode goes on with some of the other episodes we've talked about. Listening to the rabies episode that I've published before could be helpful, as well as listening to any of our cattle economics episodes or clinic changes episodes. That might get you a little bit more background, especially the episode I published not too long ago, To Vet School or Not, because we're talking a lot about the veterinary shortage and some of our thoughts about how cattle producers work with veterinarians. So take a listen to those maybe before you listen to this second part of our epidemiological episodes here. And I think that might help benefit you to get a few numbers and conversation points in your heads before we get started. Otherwise, again, a big thank you for Dr. Smith taking time to talk with us, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
I don't know how it is because now, because I've worked in the university setting long enough, but when I was an undergraduate student, and when I was a graduate student at Wisconsin, if you're an ag student and you're working on the college farm, they teach you how to do a lot of stuff instead of calling vet.
Yeah.
You don't call a vet to dehorn calves.
Yeah.
You don't call a vet to band your bull calves.
Yeah.
You took care of that yourself. Took care of vaccinating yourself. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Cattle farmers do not make a whole lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're operating on a very fine margin, but you just looking at an animal and saying it's sick and it's got a fever and boom, you just hit them with Banamine or something else yourself is not the right way to proceed.
Yeah, and I'm running into for another episode. I'm trying to get some data. It hasn't come to me yet. There's a search and rescue in the region that will go out to help down large animals.
Okay.
And I was trying to see how many calls they actually went out on, because this is other episodes I've talked about this stuff, but my cattle clients have decreased and decreased and decreased. And the point I'm working on towards that episode is no one seems to want my services. And like I was talking to search and rescue, and they're like, yeah, there was supposed to be a vet come out, never did. And, they go out to help these people get an animal up. And I'm like, do you need to get that animal up? Is this animal already gone? Is this animal gone because of a disease that might affect the rest of the herd? And those questions aren't being asked. And I'm like, I feel like local vets have, at least from my end, I'm not getting those points of contact to help people work through some of these questions. So, I mean, that's what I'm seeing, because if I remember correctly, I've had 200 cattle clients in my list. I have 17, as of, I just did my numbers for the end of the year, 17 active ones.
Yeah.
I don't, there's been a lot of changes which have affected that. The biggest one I did at a certain point was I said, I need you to be an active client for me to see your cows. and
Yeah,
I extend that to dogs, cats, guinea pigs, whatever.
yeah,
But most of my cattle clients are call every 2 to 3 years. One this last week. It'd been 14 years since they called a vet, and they were flabbergasted. There's no vets around because we were not their first to call, and they're like, "What? What do you? What do we do?" And we're like, "Well, uh, in 14 years,
yeah,
you can call someone else. For your next problem." At least at the local level, I don't know, maybe these maps, I put them up and people can uh, use them some. I will say another issue that I had because I was talking with a cattle client once and about these issues, and he said, "Well, I'm 65, and that's the average age of a cattle practitioner in the country." And that was a few years ago. And I was like, you don't really use computers much, do you?" Which is harder for me because I use them a lot. So then that's how I'm comfortable putting information out.
yeah.
There is a little disconnect between a lot of my cattle producers and how I communicate a lot too. But
We get some of those cattle producers that, you know, used us or asked for anything in years. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden they call and they're calling because they're looking for a vet.
yeah,
I'm like, you know, we're hurting, dude. There's a shortage of large animal veterinarians, and it's
yeah,
not just Kentucky. And I personally wonder how much of that is because they don't call them except every couple, 2, 3 years, or in this case, 14 years.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, eh, let's be honest. I know as a veterinarian, you want to help animals and you
hmm
want to help clients, but this is your livelihood. You
yeah,
can't rely on people that call you every 2 to 3 to 14 years.
yeah. And not that I don't want to help them.
Yeah,
I enjoy cattle medicine, but I can't I can't justify going out and breaking the trust of the people that have called and scheduled an appointment and use me more regularly.
exactly.
I
Uh,
mean, there's a financial aspect. You got to keep the business going, but there's also this person's come in every year for the last 5 years.
yeah,
Uh,
your loyalty has to be towards them.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, I don't know. I
yeah. I discuss this with all the students come in because I feel like, well, the first few students from LMU that I had, they're like, wow, I didn't realize ambulatory could be so fun and interesting. I wish I would have known this before I had tracked so much and stuff.
yeah,
And a lot of others, they do seem interested in large animal medicine. I don't know how many of them are still graduated and are in a large animal setting. I know some of them are because I've kept up with some of them, but
some of them have. I remember. I think it was either the first or second graduating class. Yeah, she was a smart girl. She wanted to be a large animal vet.
mhm,
She wanted to go visit farms and treat cattle and treat goats and sheep, pigs. She really wanted to go out and do that. And she did it for 18 months. And, it was one of those things. She'd see somebody once and not hear from them again.
yeah,
Or she'd get calls from someone that hadn't used a vet in, say, 5 years.
yeah,
And they want her to come out immediately. And
yeah,
she's like, I just said I couldn't take the stress. And well, now she works at a veterinary clinic that only does cats. And I'm like, well, you don't have to worry about moving them,
yeah.
you know.
I find it, I remember this was a frustrating thing to me as well because I focused on bovine leukemia, Johne's, and anaplasma as something I'm like, I want to test for this. I want to see what's out there. And we'd have a lot of people that would come back with the trifecta of it, you know, and I would. I know these cows. I drive by them, I see them. The farmer wouldn't make any changes, and at a certain point, he'd call up and be like, "Well, I have a skinny cow," and I'm like, "Well, you have bovine leukemia and Yonis. Well,
Mhm.
can you come out?" I'm like, "Why would I? You haven't
Yeah,
done anything I recommended, and this is the problem. I've already told you 3 years ago.
yeah. This
Um,
is not news to him.
yeah, and I cannot fix this with a shot. Yeah, it's been very frustrating. We have an annual meeting each year, and I go over things, and a lot of the discussions for the past 3 or 4 years have been, what do we do about cattle? Alarmed, I'm seeing some of the same trends in horses as I have in cattle, and that scares me because that's kind of why I came out into vet medicine.
Oh yeah,
And I'm like, how far behind where's horses going to be? And this is something I find it's annoying and funny. I think I'm a better practicing veterinarian because of my association and time in Lexington and with some world-class veterinarians.
yeah,
But practicing so close, everyone's like, "Well, I'll just go to the world-class people," and I'm like, "No, I work. They know. I know the same things. I can help you."
yeah.
So, that's one of the frustrating things. And they go to some of my friends and I'm like, "That's great. I'm glad you're going to them. They're fantastic vets. Taught me everything I knew, but
Yeah.
they did teach me I can draw a Coggins test for
I
you."
can do that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I get it.
Yeah. So and the more I talk to other vets and I hear a lot of these same things, and that's one of the reasons I want to get that out on the podcast, just because I think we need to be a little united and stuff. But
Well, we do, and I know there's a lot of changes coming. I've seen
yeah.
a lot of changes. I've been here, well, in June, I will have been here at the Diagnostic Lab 17 years.
Hmm.
And when I first started here, fully 68% of all cases were horses.
Yeah.
Okay. And then about 35% were cattle. Okay. So 5 to 10% of all the cases we saw 17 years ago comprised of cats, dogs, and anything else you could think of that was not a cow or a horse.
Hmm.
And nowadays, we're seeing cattle, it depends on the year. Is cattle still going to be anywhere from like 28 to 32% of what we see?
Hmm.
Horses, however, it's going to fluctuate between 48 and 53 or 54% of what we see.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're seeing more cats and dogs for diagnostic testing. We're seeing
Yeah.
more sheep and especially more goats.
Yeah.
But, they've also changed. 17 years ago, it was not out of line to see 6,000 animals a year for necropsy
Hmm.
and still doing 250,000 diagnostic tests.
Yeah.
We're seeing less necropsies. We're still seeing same, if not more, diagnostic testing, but now we're doing, a lot more testing for chickens than we ever had. So now
Yeah.
we do a lot of the National Poultry Improvement Plan testing,
Yeah.
and we've tried to expand our capabilities.
Do you
So
feel like, and this isn't exactly a issue. I understand where everything is, but I sometimes get frustrated because I know some of my clients have went to UK, sent something, and I'm out of the loop. Again, it's one of those touch times when I cannot help with my knowledge as well. But are you feeling like you're seeing more client initiated cases versus vet initiated, or?
I don't think we're seeing more. I think some of the big issues that we're seeing is, we don't turn people away
Yeah,
to
yeah,
show up with animals. And every producer that comes in and brings an animal, we ask them for the information. Who's
of
your local veterinarian that you use
yes, yeah,
so that we can put them on the case Yeah, you brought the animal in, you're paying for it, you're gonna get the results, but will you
Exactly.
copy
Yeah.
in your veterinarian so that if you have issues, your local veterinarian knows what the results are and can help you proceed from there.
Yeah.
And to me, it seems like more of a pushback of that they either say, I don't currently have one,
Mm-hmm.
or they write down a name, but not where they're located or an email address or even a phone number.
I remember getting one and I'm like, this, I, I don't, I'm trying to remember, but it is either someone I didn't know or someone that hadn't 10 years since I'd seen them.
Yeah,
And I was like, where'd this come from?
yeah.
Oh,
And they used your name,
yeah,
like, oh, well, I used, him 10 years ago. I'll put him down.
yeah,
And you get the information. You're like, what do I do with this?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
It was like, wow, I didn't even know you had cows anymore or
Yeah,
whatever it was.
and it's unfortunate, because I mean, we're not here to replace veterinarians. We're here to support the veterinarians. And
I feel like a lot of clients look at it as a more educated Google.
yeah,
Yeah, and I don't think I have been able to convince them of the value of me sitting down and talking with them.
exactly.
And it's because I don't I think it's great that UK does that because especially for producers, that's helping them, that's helping the state, and it gives me, I tell a lot of people, I'm like, just take it down. I could run all these tests individually, we'll all be broke. Um,
Exactly.
do it. You're getting bang for your buck is spectacular. And the information I can get to help you, even if everything's,
Well,
if, semi-normal, we know
you
what it
know,
wasn't, you know?
we're capped on our costs. You
Yeah.
know, and the state helps pay for that. It's a benefit
Yeah.
to the people. You know, Bring your animal in. If it's dead, we'll do a necropsy. If it's not dead, get your veterinarian to pull samples, run them up here. We'll get them tested quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be cheap, and your veterinarian's gonna get the best information available
Yeah.
to help you fix or face whatever issues you're looking at. And I'm hoping part of the process of fourth year students coming through the lab
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how lab works and what we do, that reminds them, okay, yeah, for my usual stuff, I'll have the courier pick it up. But this case, it's making me scratch my head.
What?
No, let's run down to the diagnostic lab and let's really get the people that know what they're doing involved.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're local, So I'm hoping by playing an intimate role in all these graduating students,
That will go.
I'm hoping that changes that attitude. You
Mm-hmm.
know, we're here to help.
Yeah.
We're not here to replace anybody. And the thing is, I don't care if you use IDEX and Antec. If you think of me and pull up my maps so that it helps you
Mm-hmm.
help your clients, then I've done my job.
Yeah. And
And
uh, I think the value, I don't know that people sometimes see this. I remember a case, it was a vitamin nutritional shortage in a cow. Sent it UK, got the answers. When I saw that in similar cases, I was like, I've seen this before. I now know what the answer is. I started supplementing, and the next farmer didn't lose any cows.
exactly.
And I'm like that. I like getting the information from UK because I can then put that with the case and prevent some of those problems. And it's a relationship with the client, the vet, and the lab,
Yeah.
which I think Kentucky does a good job. And I don't know if I realized how well Kentucky does maybe compared to other states with
Yeah.
that.
Well, we're lucky. Okay. So I told you we have, I think, 8 full-time veterinary pathologists.
Hmm.
Of those 8 full-time veterinary pathologists, four of them not only are DBMs and are board certified in pathology, they also have PhDs
Mm-hmm.
backing up their specialty.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll admit, you get kind of spoiled working here, because you're working with, you know, some people that are probably in the top 2, 3%
Yeah.
of veterinary professionals. So you get spoiled really quick. You know, it pays off because we see really interesting things. It's not just Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
Last year we had clients from Alaska,
True. You have
France,
stuff
New
from everywhere.
Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we get stuff from all over. And you know, it keeps things interesting, at least for me.
Let me ask a few questions about some of the trends. Well, maybe let me start with this because we kind of talked about a little. I mean, you've been studying trends of diseases.
Yeah.
What do you think the trend of large animal vets will be in the next 5 years, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, honestly, I think we're going to start seeing more large animal vets, at least in the short term, because that's been the push of
Mhm.
several veterinary schools. They've seen and realized there is a shortage. While the veterinary schools are responding to the shortage of large animal vets, it's not going to help until we address the issue.
Mhm.
And that is, we've got to get large animal producers to utilize and be loyal to their
Yeah.
veterinarians the way you are for your dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh? I mean, let's be honest. The typical producer I deal with, he's got anywhere from 8 to 20 head of cattle.
Mhm.
Okay, but he's got a boatload of cats, and he's got his favorite hunting dog.
For some information, we had a person upset with us the other day. They hadn't used us in 3 years, but we were looking back. They would every other year usually get us out, charged between $100 and $150.
Yeah,
They brought their dog in once and spent $200,
yeah,
and then we didn't see them for 3 years.
yeah.
You know, uh,
Well, this typical client,
it's what it is.
yeah,
Um,
he's not had anybody out to check his cattle in 2 to 5 years,
yeah,
but his dog is at the vet every year for 200 $250 visit because his hunting dog's got to be on point. And I'm like, your dog doesn't bring in the kind of money your cattle does.
yeah,
Your family doesn't eat a dog every year. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
you're raising cattle to feed your family and to sell
yeah.
to make money. That's if it's going into the food supply. I
It's
don't know, call me old fashioned, but I would want to know what I'm feeding my son has been properly vaccinated and treated and
yeah.
is,
Yeah, I talk about that on other episodes and episodes I'm working on. I think as vets, we are good at trying to improve ourselves.
yeah,
And so when we see this problem of a large animal vet shortage, I see lots of solutions how vets can improve and vet schools can improve. But we always talk about a veterinary client-patient relationship, and I don't see the push on that side, which,
well, see, that's just it. The vet schools are addressing the fact that we have a shortage in
hmm
animal medicine. They're responding by increasing class sizes and pushing for large animal training. And
yeah,
yeah, that's great that you're not teaching them anything on how to build a relationship with a client or keep them.
yes,
You know, you're not teaching them how to explain to these large animal clients the value they bring.
yeah,
Because let's be honest, not only are you a health professional,
mhm,
right?
yeah,
you are value added
Yeah.
to these cattle that are being produced. And I don't think they look at it that way.
Yeah.
Veterinary care is something, it's a non-tangible value that's added to the product.
Hmm.
You know, I don't mean to sound cold by calling cattle product, but
No, but
the end result is a product
yeah.
that is intended to go into our food supply. I would much rather purchase steak, hamburger, stuff like that from a producer for more money
Hmm.
that has treated the animal properly, humanely, and they have had health care,
Yeah.
you know? Instead of, it's got a cough, go get the whatever and give them a shot.
Give them a shot of that.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's frustrating, and I hope someone figures out a way to communicate so that clients can understand that.
yeah,
You know, and I've tried ways, and I admit I'm not perfect. But after years, I'm like, I don't know what else to try.
yeah.
And, hopefully someone else come up. Maybe I'll think of something later. I don't know. And I'm not saying all my ways were great, but it's something at least.
Yeah.
And that's, and I think I push that a lot. I'm like, I'll tell a client, if they get to, and I have to talk to them, I'm like, look, I've tried this, this, and this, and you've never met me halfway.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can help you, but a lot of times we just can't, and
Well,
tons of reasons. But
if they're not going to put in some of the effort,
yeah,
no,
and,
I,
and clients look very, and I don't mean this as an insult. When you see your animal suffering, there's a very short term, I've got to fix this,
yes,
where I feel I'm being paid to fix a herd. So
yes,
there's two different
yes,
perspectives
there is. You
that
know,
are conflicting.
to me, when I look at my pet, you go to the vet every year, you
Hmm.
know, and then, if something acute happens, we call the vet. We
Yeah.
respond immediately. But hopefully, I'm mitigating those things because I take you to the vet regularly,
And then there's not.
and then there's people that don't do that, you know? So when I look at these guys that have small to large herds of cattle or, whatever they're doing and, with livestock, yeah, I know it costs more money,
Hmm.
but if you regularly see your veterinarian,
Hmm.
you can prevent
Us
how much, you
from
know,
having to come out there
right.
for other emergencies.
Yeah. Instead of you calling a vet a couple of times a year to respond to, an acute situation, maybe if you had
Or chronic,
veteran,
that seems
yeah,
acute.
or chronic, but maybe if you had your veterinarian visit a couple of times a year, how much of this could you prevent? And you actually probably will save yourself money in the long run,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And there's benefits to that. You've created a personal relationship with your veterinarian. Then
Hmm.
when you do have an emergent situation, they're not going to tell you, I can't help you because you've not used us in 2, 3 years. They're
Yeah,
going to be like, hey, I'm out at this guy's place twice a year.
I'm going to go out now.
He's a client. I'm going now.
Yeah,
It pays off.
yeah.
We're all connected, and that I think that's the last thing I try to tell these students.
Yeah.
It isn't animal health and human health.
It's
It's one health.
one
We're
hell.
all
Yeah,
connected, you know. And that's not just health. That's in our livelihoods. That's in our interactions. That's how we treat our animals, how we treat each other.
yeah.
Everything is interconnected. And, you know, honestly, I think so much of this stuff can be changed if we can just change the mindset
Hmm.
of producers that we're not here to take all your money. We're
Yeah.
not here to cause you problems. We're not here to test and be like, oh, that's a reportable disease. We're going to tell the state vet, and then the
Yeah.
producer freaks out, thinks they're going to get, you know, everybody showing up on their farm. We're here to help you not have a problem,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
I would rather see healthy animals and my clients succeed than just see them at their worst times.
right? That's the reality, and I tell these fourth year students, I'm like, unfortunately, a lot of your clients, you're going to see them at their very worst.
Yes.
It's much better if you can get them in there regularly and not have to be at that point.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
wouldn't that be a much better reality for you as a practitioner? You
Yeah.
know,
Much, I mean, and I see that sometimes.
yeah,
The clients that are in, they have less problems, and they when they do have a problem, we're usually getting it. Yesterday I said, "You got this early, so it's not as bad as I typically see it."
that's right.
So, now we don't have as much of an issue.
Well, that's the universal truth of epidemiology that you can take home. The
Yeah.
earlier you catch it, the better the outcome. You know?
That's yeah.
And that works in animals, that works in humans.
So yeah, let me kind of flip back to just a few questions on
Oh
the
yeah,
maps. And you've mentioned goats, sheep, maybe not as much, but when I was looking through them, it looks like parasitism and nutritional deficiencies are the big things that I saw.
they
That
are.
that pretty much, and I have a feeling some of the nutritional deficiencies were related to parasites.
Yes.
Is there other trends in goat, sheep that you're seeing? Is that the biggest one? And
Currently, right now, that's the biggest thing. We've seen the clientele change.
yeah, I feel like they're much more pets now than
Yeah.
the
And
owners don't know they're pets yet, but
no,
they're that's where it is.
that's where they are. And, we've had people bring in goats, and the cause of death is parasitism,
Hmm.
and you explain to them what that is, and, they're kind of caught off guard because they thought they were feeding the goat the best available food and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, well, yeah, but did you have your vet come visit?
Yeah,
No. You know, did
yeah,
you give it any supplementation to stop
the
worms or anything else?
because
Nope.
yeah,
Well, vet would have told you to do that
yeah,
and would have given you exactly what you needed,
yeah,
you know? Plus, the other thing is, it's not the groups that have, large amounts of goats,
mm,
like, I know a guy down Garrett County. He produces 200 to 300 goats a year,
mm,
and he sells all of them directly.
yeah,
Uh, and he has no issue because, well, he has a vet out there twice a year. You
yeah,
know, closed herd. He's very anal about the product he produces, but they're not pets to him.
yeah,
They're part of his livelihood. But he's got a neighbor 8 miles down the road that's got 6 goats, and they are pets.
hmm,
And his 6 goats he's had for years, and then one day 2 of them died. So he brought them here, and it was parasitism.
hmm,
And he hadn't had a vet look at those goats in
yeah.
probably 4 years.
And that's the biggest thing I see is parasites. And I
Yeah,
testing and talking and saying, here's how we have to manage this, but it
yeah.
usually takes repeat fecals and,
The unfortunate reality is a lot of, I can't give you an exact percentage, but it's enough that it sticks out that so many of the issues we see, it's a management problem,
yeah.
you know? Yeah,
Another question, the rabies map, there was a lot of information on that.
yeah.
Once I figured out how to pare it
Put it
down a little
down.
bit, got a little bit better. But I
Yeah,
noticed there was a drop in rabies. It looked like between like 1989 and 1990. Do
Yeah,
you know a reason? Was that a testing thing, or did we do something preventatively that changed that?
it's a combination.
Okay.
So, back in 89, they noticed how many animals they were testing. And I
Yeah.
don't know if you looked at the overall numbers, but over the last 30 years, we've tested tens of thousands of animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And as a statewide whole, we run a 2% positive rate. Okay. Now that sounds great. Across the board, across the state, about 2% of the animals we test are positive. Uh, Bad thing is you'll see individual differences in different counties. Like one county may have a 10% positive rate,
Mm-hmm.
but you'll have a bunch of counties that have a 0% positive rate.
Yeah.
Now, what we've seen over the years is some people brought up that we're doing way too much testing. They're like, to do a rabies test, you got to do the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So that animal's got to die.
Yeah.
And they're like, how many animals are we testing that maybe should have been quarantined
Mm,
instead of you immediately put them down, test them,
yeah.
and they're like, I get it. If there was a potential human exposure, then you
Yeah.
don't hesitate, put the animal down, you do the testing. But if there was no human exposure or no exposure to your pet, you know, because I mean, when you're looking at 93% of the animals you test are negative, you suddenly realize, like, wow, that's over 30,000 animals killed that did not have the disease.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this issue started rearing its head in 89. And it wasn't that they didn't want to test, they
Mm-hmm.
wanted to test better.
I see.
So uh, what they did was they made sure all the testing protocols were standardized, since we're seeing testing at different
Yeah.
places and different levels. The other thing is education. Just because an animal's acting weird doesn't mean it's got
Yeah.
rabies. And if you do suspect it has rabies, don't shoot it in the head.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, that's still the reality. While
Yeah.
we run a 2% positive rate for the state, we run a 93% negative. Well,
Mm,
that doesn't add up to 100. And
mm-hmm.
that's because we run between 4 and 5% unable to test.
Ah,
And that is because, A, I shot it in the head. Well, you can't test it now because, well,
it's
yeah.
yeah.
Or, I don't know. I found this animal that was baking in the sun for 8 days and they brought it in for rabies
Yeah.
testing.
How are you going to?
That's not good either.
Yeah.
And what I worry about is we're really good at our rabies testing,
Yeah.
really good at making that information available. And we have a low percent positive rate, but that unable to be tested or unsatisfactory level to be tested is way too high.
Yeah.
So when we first started putting this data out in map form 4 years ago or so, our unable to be tested rate was actually about 6 to 7%.
Okay.
So we've made a concerted push over the last 5 years or so to tell people, if you see an animal acting funny and it hasn't attacked you or a family member or pet, leave it alone.
Yeah.
Call animal control.
Yeah.
Okay. Whatever you do, don't shoot it in the head.
Yeah.
That's been our big thing. You know, and we've told them we can't test it if you do that. Well, we're not perfect, but we've dropped about 2.5% in unsatisfactory testing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so it's not solved, but it's working towards the right way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing changes overnight.
no, nothing changes overnight. And, the other thing is, while we're educating them to do that, there's also, because I've had students be like, do you know you've tested a parakeet for rabies? And I'm like, well, I didn't, but yes, somebody did. I said, we've also tested gerbils and we've also tested, hamsters. And, if you dig deep enough in there, yes, we have tested lizards for rabies.
Which,
Now, why would you do that? When a client, usually a mom, comes in
mm,
and says, this animal bit my child, and
yeah,
they're frantic over it, it does not matter how much you explain to her that that gecko did not give your kid rabies. Your
yeah,
kid doesn't have rabies. At some point, you just shut up, say, okay, I'll test it.
yeah, yeah,
And that's just the reality of it.
yeah,
Sometimes these animals that there's no way they have rabies are tested to calm somebody down.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I know when we've had testing, we just like seeing that no,
yeah,
that it's negative. Can't say I've seen any parakeets or lizards in, but
thank goodness.
still it's something that I'm like I like seeing that. I've been vaccinated,
Yeah,
but I don't need it to be tested. So,
no, no,
I sleep better at night. So
yeah,
I can understand why.
yeah,
And I have a lot of education behind me understanding
exactly.
rabies.
Yes,
So yeah, that makes
you
sense.
know,
Ease
and
someone's mind if you can.
it makes sense. If it's bad enough seeing rabies in an animal.
Yeah,
If you've ever seen a human with rabies, yeah, no, test anything you want. I mean,
just yeah, if
yeah,
you
it's
yeah.
horrible. Yeah, the change basically started when somebody in Frankfurt, and I'll leave it at that because I don't know who the person was, but I know where it originated. Some bean counter got it in their head that, all these animals that we're killing that are negative
Mm-hmm.
costs us X number of dollars
Yeah.
because, the state pays for that rabies testing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody figured out, this is adding up quick for all these animals that didn't need to be put down and tested.
Yeah.
So that's what started it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Now, that may have started it, but, you know, kind of feel bad if I put down someone's pet,
Yeah.
or $1,500 bull or, an even more expensive horse because, oh, it might have rabies and it didn't, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, and I tell like my students when they do testing, rabies is a little different conversation, but I'm like, I want you to have an idea of what you're going to get back on these tests before you
Yeah,
send them out.
yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense with rabies too. It's like if there's no neurologic signs, uh, so yeah, it sounds like, refining when to test is a good thing too.
yeah. Well, a student asked me, well, what about quarantine now?
Hmm.
I was like, well, okay, sure, you can do that. Who's going to pay for it?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, the owner. And I said, okay, if you know the owner,
Hmm.
animal, but, if we look up all these cases and look at wildlife versus whatever, the chances of you actually knowing who owns that animal may be low.
Yeah.
The other thing is maybe you do know the owner of that animal. What if they don't have the money to pay for however long quarantine you decide to impose?
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
The amount of problems we've had getting rabies vaccines out, often because of finances.
Yeah,
Uh, or there's other reasons too, but I mean,
yeah,
I think a lot of times I've had students and conversations with various people, and I'm like, I've had people walk out of my clinic refusing to get a rabies shot. There are reasons that we'll have problems quarantining or getting these vaccines on board. I've had other health professionals just totally flabbergasted that what your clients aren't up to date on their rabies, and I'm like,
No,
no, no. So it's that's been a big push at our clinic, and we still have people that they won't. I mean, I won't let them do stuff. I'm like, you get this or we're done, and they're like, okay, we're done,
yeah.
and I'm like, okay, well, I'd rather be safe, but
Well, and that's sad that it's sad that a vaccine causes that, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Just get the vaccine.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
I mean, we've had the rabies vaccine for how long?
Was what Pasteur back in what
Yeah,
200 years, 150, 200 years?
exactly. It's safe. It
Yeah.
is not prohibitively expensive to get.
No, not at all.
And what you prevent, well, uh, there's just no question you vaccinate for rabies. You
Yeah.
know, um, you know, and the thing is, a lot of people don't stop to think about it. We are very lucky in the United States to have the
Oh yeah.
robust rabies vaccination program we do.
Because what is it? 60,000 people died last year of rabies in the rest of the world.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm thinking below 10 or something in the U.S.
and to my knowledge, it was less than five
Less
last year.
than five. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you
I mean,
know,
that's just such a stark difference.
exactly. You
Uh,
know, vaccines make a difference.
they
You
do.
know, and the thing is, if you're not going to vaccinate for rabies, what else are you not going to do?
Yeah.
That's not worth putting you or your staff at risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know,
that's just a line I had to draw. And I was like, I can't put my people at risk. We're not, it's not worth it.
no.
And
Well, I did want to tell you this. I know you've spent some time looking through the maps and stuff.
mhm.
If there's something you can think of that we're not showing up there,
Yeah,
or somebody that listens to this is like, hey, these are cool, but it'd be really cool if they had a map of this and so.
yeah.
If somebody shoots me a message or an email or something, if we test for it, if we've got the data, I can build it.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
I will keep that in mind, and I
yeah.
hope someone listening will keep that in mind too, because this is awesome. It's the conversations have been wonderful, but this as well. Do you have time for another few questions?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, I had one more. Potomac horse fever.
Oh, yeah.
Are those I just I talk about vaccinating for that. I recommend it to my clients because Ohio River Valley, it's around here.
Oh, yeah.
I just expected to see higher numbers. Was that just me being off on my thoughts, or are the vaccines working and we're seeing lower numbers?
We're still testing,
Yeah.
and we're still testing quite a bit.
Hmm.
The number of positives we're seeing, though, has dropped tremendously.
Yeah.
I think it's safe at this point to say that people are vaccinating and it's
Okay.
working.
Good.
Uh, it's like, I don't know if you're aware of this. So, the equine leptospirosis vaccine. When I started here at the lab in 2006, I was, at that point, I was just an analyst and learning the ropes. I asked my boss, I was like, why do we have so much leptospirosis in horses around here? Because up until that point, 99% of all my animal experience had been cattle.
Hmm.
I'm like, we vaccinate cattle, it's dirt cheap. You know, I was vaccinating a dairy cow once, and actually, cow moved at the right time that the needle went in me, and I got vaccinated for lepto too. You know,
Yeah.
but I'm like, is there, what's going on here? And he's like, well, we don't have a vaccine in horses. I was like, whoa, I did not know that. I asked him why we didn't have a vaccine for lepto in horses, and he said, well, these vaccine companies, they think it's a Kentucky problem
Mm.
only, and they're not going to invest that kind of money for just a localized problem. A couple of years later, we got the bright idea. we asked every lab like us, we asked every lab in the US and every lab in Canada to send us any leftover serum samples from horses that they weren't
Okay.
using. And 27 of those labs responded and they sent us samples and we ran them in our serology department here. Lo and behold, leptospirosis in horses is not a Kentucky problem. It's
Mm.
all over. So my boss took that data that we generated and he wrote a white paper and he
Hmm.
sent it to Zoetis. What did Zoetis do? They basically did the same thing we did. They went and got samples from
Yeah.
all over the US. And what did they do? They did the same testing that we had already done. And what were the results? Guess what? You
Right.
just verified exactly what we told you, that it's not a Kentucky problem, it's a horse problem. So they produced equine leptospirosis vaccine.
That it's nice to see a very direct effect
Yeah.
there. I will have
And
to do a little research on equine lepto myself because that's not one I've not
so,
overly up to date on lepto in the
yeah,
large animal. I know well, in cattle, I'm
yeah.
more familiar, and in dogs and cats, I'll have to look into the horse stuff a little bit.
Well, we get up until a few years ago, we got a lot of leptospiral abortions in horses.
Hmm.
Well, I am happy to say, what was it? 2 years ago, 3 years ago, was the first breeding season in over 20 years that we had no lepto abortions in horses.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
First time.
Yeah,
And it was because of the vaccine.
good.
And, I admit, that first year when it was rolling out, we were talking to producers. They're like, I really don't want to be the guinea pig.
Yeah,
Okay. But then we had some that are like, I had such a problem with lepto last year, I'll try anything. And it
yeah,
worked. I kind of feel like that's what's happening with Potomac horse fever. I think
working.
first couple of years there was some hold off because, ooh, new vaccine,
Yeah.
but they've seen it's working and it seems to be fairly widely adopted.
Okay.
What I'm gathering, people are vaccinating for it. It's working.
Okay.
You've seen cases drop. I mean, we still have, horses come in and they're getting tested for it, but
Yeah.
it's no fun me throwing it up on the map and being like, hey, this one tested negative.
Yeah.
So that makes a boring map because you don't have a whole lot of positives popping
Yeah.
up. But I'd much rather see an empty map than it be full of disease.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
because that just means hopefully someday I can retire and be like I made a little bit of an impact,
Yeah. Yeah.
not being a vet. I got accepted to vet school. I didn't go to vet school because I worked for a vet one summer and I was like, I can't do this. I don't know if it was just a bad summer for it or what, but the first day on the job, I was in there with the vet and he put down like 6 dogs. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't do this every day for the rest of my life. I admit it. I'm too soft. I
Yeah.
can't do that. And one of them was a guy that he wanted to put the animal down because he couldn't pay for the treatment or didn't want to pay for the
Yeah.
treatment. I don't know. And I'm just like, yeah, if I was the vet, I'd be in jail because I'd smack him for that. That's not a reason to put an animal down. So I went a different way and I still,
That's some of I've done some interviews with some other vets just to show different ways that you can go in vet medicine. So here we just had our little interview letting people know there are other options to be
there are other
in the
options.
field and helping, yet
Yeah.
not practicing in the front lines or whatever.
Well, let's be honest, if I was a practicing vet trying to get this information out, I'm getting more information out to people through the maps than I would be as a practicing vet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you
uh,
have a much broader way of communicating.
yeah,
That's helpful because I think a lot of vets are we like being independent, but sometimes that can pigeonhole us a little too much.
Yeah.
Are there any particular diseases you're worried about in the next 2 to 3 years, nationwide, statewide? Anything
Well,
you're watching and you're like, oh, this is going to be a problem?
at least for the state,
And I won't hold you if you're wrong. That might be a good
yeah,
thing.
I appreciate that. At least in the state of Kentucky, for horses, we're going to continue to see issues with nocardiiform placentitis. That has been a hot topic
Hmm.
previous to the vaccine. In years where we had high leptospirosis, we were getting low nocardiiform cases.
Hmm.
So that led to the idea and the accepted viewpoint that lepto pops up when we got wet mud.
Yeah.
Okay. So the years we weren't having lepto, those years late in summer when it's hot and dry and dusty, suddenly that's when nocardiiform was popping.
Mm.
The other thing is it's been around long enough. It seems like it's rearing its head every 3 to 7 years.
Mm.
You know, we get cases every year. A couple this year, 15 one year, maybe 8 one year, and then boom, suddenly we got 275 cases.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a really bad year for it. And then I'm not saying this as a downside to anybody, but that's when everybody panics and they want to have
Yeah.
a meeting over it, and suddenly you've pulled together, you know, people from multiple groups,
Hmm.
and veterinarians, and everybody's trying to brainstorm and, how do we fix this? And I'm like, it's too late,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. It's accepted that hot, dry, late summer, that's the years then we see it during, foaling time. We start seeing early, mid, and late abortions. Whatever's happening this year, you're not going to stop it. It's too late. You
Yeah.
need to start looking before the next time it happens.
Yeah.
Does anybody listen to the staff epidemiologist? Ooh. Has anybody fixed nocardiiform yet? No.
Yeah.
Maybe listen to your staff epidemiologist, and that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, the other thing is I think unless we see a change in how owners and producers interact with their veterinarians, I think we're going to see an increase in deaths from parasitism and
Oh, yeah.
nutritional deficiencies across the board.
Yeah. Not just goats and sheep,
Not just goats, not
cattle.
just sheep. You're going to see cattle. And, you know, I would much rather a veterinarian tell me what nutrient I'm missing for
Hmm.
my animals than listening to the old guy down the road that's in his 80s and he's got pigs and he's like, you don't need to worry about that. Just shove a piece of coal down its throat and it'll be fine. That was the craziest advice I ever got in my life. Got pigs? You don't need to worry about supplementing them. Shove a piece of coal down their
Not a
throat.
piece
I'm
of
like,
coal. Must
that
be.
sounds weird, but I mean, he fully believed it. Okay, man. I'm not going to go that way, but I'm sure a lot of people have, you know.
I've heard coffee grounds fix everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I.
Oh, yeah. But I think, yeah, parasitism is going to continue to rise
Yeah.
unless there's a change there. Nocardiiform, it's going to continue to be a cyclical problem in horses
Yeah.
unless the way we look at it and look for the problem is changed. In my opinion, that's
Yeah.
not a UK opinion. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, on top of that, we're just going to see more of the same. You know, big problem in cattle is the pneumonias and bronchopneumonias. And that's all weather related.
Yeah.
I think what we're really going to see is just, I think we're going to continue to see things shift. And it's all going to be because, I think we're just on a normal weather shift. You
Mm,
know, 3 weeks ago, we were talking about it at work that, it's been a mild winter,
yeah.
you know. Well, here today, most everything is closed in Lexington because we got 3 inches of snow dumped on us, and nobody around here knows how to drive in the snow. You But yet, my father-in-law, who lives in Madison, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
sent me a picture last night. They've got 21 inches on the ground, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's horrible." And he's like, "Well, I'm going to Walmart."
Yeah.
Okay, and I remember being at school in Wisconsin, and I'd gotten back from Christmas break in Kentucky, and it had been 72 degrees. I had to cut grass on Christmas Eve for my mom, and I get back, after the New Year, so like January 3rd,
Yeah.
and it started snowing, and it snowed for 3 days. And when it was done, there was 42 inches of snow, and I was like, "How do you people survive this?" And they're like, "Well, it's normal, And I mean, it was weird because I'm on campus trying to go to class, and I am walking to class through trenches that
Yeah.
they've dug down the sidewalk.
So you can,
I'm
yeah.
like, wow. So, I guess it's what you get used to.
Yeah.
It was kind of warm through
Hmm.
November, and then all of a sudden, we got a little rain, it got chillier, and then last week, the high on Monday was like 14 degrees
Yeah.
here. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like this, you know?
You've
Uh,
gotten used to it.
yeah. And then here it is today, and I'm like, it's 27 degrees. It feels kind of balmy compared to Monday, but we've also got snow getting dumped on the ground, and it just happened so fast. And I was one of the few that didn't go run to buy milk and bread.
Yeah, we usually, can survive. But yeah,
Yeah,
just through this interview, I've watched, and since it'll probably air in summer, everyone's going to be like, "What do you mean it's 90 degrees outside?"
yeah,
But I've watched where I could only see the snow still falling some up here, and then it turned to bright and sunny, and now there's snow again.
yeah.
You know, and that's so many times that affects
Yeah.
these weather changes affect coccidia. I love
Oh yeah.
clients. I tell them 3 weeks after it rains, you're going to call me,
Uh-huh.
and they do. And they just, well, the drugs aren't working. I'm like, here, let me explain the life cycle again, and you know, um,
Did you ever think, as you were studying to be a vet, that so much of your job would be educating the general public?
uh, no, I didn't realize that. I think I like it.
Yeah,
My practice manager is actually my sister, and so getting compliments from her can be challenging, but she says I am good at educating.
good.
And that's one of the reasons I start the podcast too, because like you mentioned earlier, I just see how everything is connected.
Yeah,
And I do like doing that. There are times I get frustrated because, you're still in a clinic and I've got whatever, 15, 20 minutes to get so much information. And that's where I do this podcast. I'm like, go listen to my lecture. I'll be curious because the lectures I get excited about, no one cares about. I've got a good one on fleas coming up. I'll be like, go listen to that. And no one, and that's the lowest numbers on the podcast. And
gotcha.
then the ones I like, well, this is crap. I'm getting it out here because I need something out here are my highest numbers. And I'm like, what? So, but I enjoy that because I think it's something that I'm like, if people can understand why we're doing something, we can make something better.
Exactly.
Um, so I did not realize that to answer your question, but it's something that I've enjoyed to a point
Good.
in different and that's why again with the podcast I try to do it in my own way
Yeah.
because I can't always and that's been one of the problems with the cattle producers is I don't think like they do and that's not an insult, it's just
No,
I'm coming at from this perspective and I can only I want to educate in the way they can understand, but sometimes it doesn't I can't meet them there.
A lot of these cattle producers are older, or they didn't go to school. They learned from their dad or their
Yeah.
granddad or something like that, and they're just doing it the same way. And
I get that a lot. This is how
things
my
are
dad
changing.
did it. Why are
Yeah,
you saying it was wrong? And I'm like, no, no, I watched what you did there. I'm actually going to use what your dad used when I go to the next farm, but maybe we could take these mineral panel results and not shove coal down a pig's throat, you know.
exactly.
So I did enjoy because I did not plan to work on cattle when I came out, but in 2010 there were no jobs, so I started my own ambulatory service, mostly horses. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah,
And then I'm like, well, I'm here. I should work on other animals. So I was like, oh, wait, I hope I learned something in cat from cattle in vet school. And I was like, oh, I did. I did.
yeah,
And it's been interesting learning from the people around here.
yeah,
You know, sometimes they call you and you're like, these people have been there was a dairy farm, the last one in the county, it shut down. And I'm like, they've been running this dairy since before I was born and
yeah,
pulling. And when they called me for a dystocia, I was like, oh dear Lord, how am I going to help them?
yeah,
But I learned a lot from them, which helped other people, and I could some, I could, and then unfortunately the dairy shut down because the milk truck wouldn't come out, and because they were the last one,
yeah,
and that's other conversations.
yeah.
So yeah, no, it's been interesting interacting with people and learning, and I hope that I think this episode, especially for vet students, hopefully if a client can listen to us ramble on about disease this long, they'll see at least why there's value in what we're doing. And I also tell people I like it that I have because if I don't know the answer, I I have friends I can call. I've called UK
Yeah,
and some of my horse friends, top surgeons in the world. And I agree with your statements about UK being,
yeah,
top percentage of vets or staff there.
yeah.
And I think we're in a lucky area to have that.
We
Uh,
are. Well,
uh,
a lot of people don't realize one of our pathologists actually did his veterinary degree at Iowa. So he's actually a swine expert
oh yeah,
in addition to, being boarded and everything else, but it's not usual that you would have someone with that level of swine expertise here,
here,
you
yeah.
know?
This is not a
Yeah, and
metropolis of Cincinnati is long gone.
right. So, and we've gotten some crazy things. A couple of years ago, we got two alligators.
Oh, now that's different.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it caught me off guard. I was like,
You didn't do rabies testing on them, right?
no, no,
Okay.
no. Turns out there's this little reptile farm a couple of counties over. And I'm like, they get alligators? And they're like, well, they don't now because here. And I'm like, oh.
Oh, well, yeah.
And
Okay.
apparently you can have alligators in Kentucky.
Okay.
During the winter, they just kind of hibernate.
Huh.
They kind of just slow down and don't
Okay.
do much. And it was springtime and warming up, and they were getting more active, and they both croaked. So they
Okay.
brought in a 3 foot alligator and a 4.5 foot one. And guess what killed them?
Not the cold.
Parasites.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did a little work at the Newport Aquarium.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if UK's done much work with them or any.
Not a whole lot, but I take my kid there quite often.
Yeah. I really the staff there is great. I haven't talked to them for a little bit, but I was always impressed and they taught me a lot. But yeah, I remember treating for parasites, and when you're treating entire tanks, you're dumping a lot of I think it's formalin we used
Yeah.
diluted to kill parasites, and I just remember putting that in the tanks. That was a
Yeah.
fun
Yeah.
uh, fun thing to do. tried to hold my breath for a little while.
Well, yeah,
But yeah, so it's amazing the animals that you run across around here too. I would
yeah.
not have expected you to have done some necropsies on alligators.
Oh, not at all, but we did. And
That's that's
yeah,
yeah.
we ended up fixing one of them in formalin. We use it now to take out to educate kids.
Yeah, yeah,
So last every April, my kids' preschool does a science night,
yeah.
and they had me do it last year.
I
They,
I bet that went over well with
well,
alligator.
the kids love the alligator. They love the 20-foot albino python
Oh,
we had fixed that I brought in.
okay.
And, we had all kinds of ooey stuff that the parents were like, "Oh,"
Yeah,
and the kids were just like, that's awesome. Can I touch it? It was great. So,
yeah. I enjoy when I go to schools. I have a presentation, and do you want to be a vet? And all basic stuff. I haven't done it for a while. They maybe I'm not sure. Maybe it's because of the pictures. Because I'll show some nice pictures, and I'm like, and here's me removing an eye from a cow,
yeah,
and the students, the kids, they love it, and the teachers, oh, can we do?
yeah,
Like, oh, this is what they want to get into.
I know,
So,
the
but
grosser the better for the kids. So,
yeah. Yeah, it's well, I remember going to school, I had to listen to the teachers. Now it's like, well, what are you going to do?
it's just guidelines now.
It's just guideline. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But so yeah, this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it.
I have too.
Yeah, thank you for the time. Otherwise, just kind of a closing question. Anything else you want to say, or any way you hope or envision these maps kind of being used in the state to, and we've briefly touched on that, but anything else you kind of
Well,
for
well,
these to
I
use?
do have a piece of good news I'll share with you.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
a professor at the lab in Missouri
Hmm.
contacted me a couple of months ago, and they have made it their goal in 2024 uh, to purchase the equipment and hire a designated person, and they are going to have me come out for a week,
Oh,
and they want to set up and mirror what we're doing with their
excellent.
data. And I'm
That's,
like, this is the first one.
yeah,
We can get this one.
others will come.
Maybe we can get that domino effect going. Even if it doesn't happen before I retire, if I just see it going in the right direction,
Yeah,
even if we don't get a national map, which is kind of like my ultimate dream,
yeah,
just seeing more states kind of adopt this, I think if that information is available for your local area,
yeah,
it's just one more thing that makes what we do real, you
yeah,
know? Because let's be honest, a lot of people, thinking about disease and specific population stuff, it's all kind of abstract to them
yeah,
unless they see something close to home or what they perceive as real.
yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah,
I have what is it? The alerts, equine disease outbreak alerts
yeah, yeah,
I'm signed up for. And I would post if there was something local, no one would say anything. But someone's heard we had an EHV outbreak in Colorado. What do I need to do? And I'm like, well, probably nothing, but
yeah,
3 months ago we had a local something and or West Nile I think was the specific one and I'm like you didn't seem to care about that.
yeah. That one might have mattered more than Colorado
Uh,
issue. Yeah,
yeah, so but I think if people realize that this data can help them locally and maybe even just put a picture to it. So many people
yeah,
learn by pictures and numbers and they're like, oh wow, there's this much of that
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Maybe that will start driving home how important this what as veterinarians what was done in the profession and just that someone has taken the time to get this information out there.
Well,
But
thank you for having me. I
yeah,
really appreciate this.
yeah, thank you very much. This has been a fun conversation for me and
Okay,
thank you for taking the time.
you do it.
So again, a gigantic thank you to Dr. Smith for taking the time to work with us on making these episodes of Vet Talk, the veterinary podcast. If you want to take a look at the maps she's made, I have the links in the podcast information. So please take a look at that and consider, for the vets out there, consider using the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab where you can and take advantage of the knowledge that they have at their disposal. I'm Dr. Nathan. Thanks for listening. I hope our discussions are valuable to you and aid in giving perspective. If you want to contact us, please reach out to theveterinarypodcast@gmail.com. You can find a complete list of the podcast episodes on SoundCloud. If you find this information helpful and want more content, please join our Patreon, patreon.com/theveterinarypodcast. And don't forget to follow our Facebook page, facebook.com/theveterinarypodcast. As always, thanks for listening, and I hope this information is helpful to you. If you do find it helpful, please like it, share it, so other people may find it helpful as well.